Welcome to the Lair of Secrets podcast, a podcast exploring the sprawling caverns of gaming, hidden treasures of geekdom, and the unexpected intersections of reality. I'm Ken Newquist, and I run in the dark because it's January, and there is no sunlight anymore because the gym is closed, and I have to go outside to run. So,
ouch. You'll have to explain why the gym is closed.
Yes.
I'm David Moore, and I had an excellent holiday, and I am ready for the new year. But I am not ready with the segue, even though this is the second time we're doing this. So
just because we're here doesn't mean we're prepared.
So normally we start with a little bit of back and forth before we get to our main topic, where our main topic today is going to be board games that we love. And but we're going to start in the game room anyway and talk about games in general. You have one.
Yeah,
here
so I do. Oh, yes, I do. So this is, for my friends on Twitch, this is Atari 50. And you may say, but Ken, didn't you talk about getting Atari Replay or whatever? And yes, I did. And yes, it's very similar. But this is more like a virtual museum with all the Atari games. And so it's pretty cool because basically the company that produced this, Digital Eclipse, what they did is they went in and they interviewed like the original game designer. So they have a whole timeline of basically the history of Atari. So going back to the like mid 70s and talking about Pong, right? And talking about the origin of Pong, the hardware that Pong ran on, legends behind Pong, and the machine. They had a great thing where they interviewed all these different people from that time period. And they talked about the legend of the broken Pong machine. And I had never actually heard this before. And so the legend of the broken Pong machine is they deployed it to some bar in California. The next day, the bar owner calls and basically is like, your machine is crap. Get rid of it. It broke after, just like one night. What the hell, right? And so the guy who had the lead engineer, or whomever the designer of Pong, shows up. And he realizes as he opens it and all these quarters fill out that it wasn't broken. It was just
full of quarters.
Stuffed full of quarters.
Yes, I did hear that one before.
It's pretty, and apparently it's like actually true. This is like the first like handmade Pong cabinet that their user testing was, let's go stick at a bar in California somewhere and see what happens, right? And so it turned out like it was like the perfect bar machine, right? Because you could play with one hand, you could play, like control the paddle while you were drinking your beer, and it filled up with quarters. So it's a cool presentation because you basically have like all of this information about the Atari games, and it actually covers the entirety of the Atari's history up through like the Jaguar, right? So it talks about Lynx, it talks about Jaguar, it talks about the different iterations of the Atari machines, including the computers, and it's pretty cool. It's a better, more compelling presentation than the previous version, which was basically like, let's take all the Atari games and stick them on a Switch cartridge, and there you go. Like you could read the manuals, but that was about it. This actually provides you context, and it's pretty cool. Like they talk about Atari made pinball machines. I had no idea that Atari made pinball machines.
I can't name a single one of them, but I do know that they did make them for a while. So
and the guys the people who worked on those original pinball machines went on to work on like some of the really famous pinball machines during the 80s, which their names escape me right now. But it's just a cool, like, I didn't know how much I was going to enjoy it, but it's pretty cool to like read like these short clips, see original advertisements, some of which are just like very cringeworthy in 2022. And just to kind of see the history of the hobby. The other things that are cool about it is it actually has a functional version of Starmaster. Starmaster is a 3D, like one of the first dogfighting style, like 3D first person starfighter type simulators that inspired apparently X-Wing, like a lot of the classic, like all the classic dogfighting starfighter games that came after Wing Commander. This game inspired those, but I could not find a functional port of that game because when Atari released it for the 2600, it came with this added keypad. Like I'm holding up my phone, but it was only ever used for this game, and you could only control the game using this keypad, right? And so you needed it to bring up the galaxy map and choose where in the galaxy you wanted to go and what have you. And so none of the emulators could actually support this, except they do on this version. Nice. So that was pretty cool. Nice. There's a remastered Yar's Revenge. I love Yar's Revenge. It's updated with like new graphics
on the Atari VCS. So I finally understand it now. Like, when I played it before, it was a friend's copy who had lost the manual, of course.
Right.
And so he's like, here, and just like hands me the joystick. And it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how it works. And then, it's like, it's also amazing being older, playing so many video games over my life. It's like, oh, this is the pattern.
Right.
It's like it's super easy to guess the pattern when you've gone through as many video games as you and I have.
Right.
But like when it starts spinning that little star thing that's going to shoot at you, it's like, okay, well, get ready to dodge. And this is how I'm going to dodge, because it's not a super smart AI like they would, or a super smart script like they would have now.
Right.
But yeah.
And so it also has, kids who grew up in the 80s will remember there was a series called Sword Quest, and it was most notable because it had like these quests associated with it. Like you could win a prize, right, for having completed each of the games.
It was like Sword Quest and like Water Quest and Earth Quest, I think. It was
Fire Quest, Water Quest, Earth Quest, and then the mythical, never made Ultimate Vaporware Air Quest.
Okay.
Because Atari went basically like the video game crash happened,
right?
And then Atari's like, yeah, we can't do this anymore. Right. But they actually completed the game, so they went back and they looked at like the mock-ups and like the storyboards and what have you for Airworld, and they made a version of Airworld that you can play.
Nice.
So if you've been waiting for the fourth version,
has earth and fire and water. I don't know if it has air. I'll have to check that out.
I don't think I think it's exclusive to this collection, because
that would not surprise me, because I think basically what's on the VCS is the other collection that you have as well on the Switch.
Right. Right. Which we talked about in our last episode, if I remember correctly, because we were geeking out about your Atari. So that was part of what inspired me to like get this version. But it's cool for anybody who is interested in the history of gaming and kind of like what like hardware and software development looked like in the early years, right? Like the fact that, like Pong ran on dedicated hardware because that was the only way that you could run it.
Yep. It was not a general purpose computing machine.
Right. It could do one thing.
It could
run Pong.
Yeah. But when you turned it on, you were instantly in Pong. It wasn't like a several minute boot up sequence or anything like that.
Right. So that's that's my big development on the Atari front. My other, like at the other opposite end of the spectrum, my family got a PlayStation 5. We haven't had one for the last, like, it came out 2 years ago. They've been difficult to get.
You got it, but didn't talk much about it last time. So
right, so we got it, and so now so cool. And I gave in and I got Cyberpunk 2077 because look, I just can't do the keyboard and mouse.
You mentioned that. You did mention that.
I think we talked about this before. So I am so much better with the game console than I am with keyboard and mouse.
It's much better now as well. Like when the original Xbox came out, and you'd have things like Halo on both I think it was Halo on both PC and Xbox, and cross-play was a thing. The PC players would just trash the Xbox players because they could look up and down and left and right super quickly and easily with the mouse. But that wasn't the case with controllers. But that's because developers are just learning how to program for controllers in general.
Yeah, so it's been great. I've played it way more than I have on my Mac because I was using GeForce Now. So I achieved my goal over Christmas break of actually being able to play Cyberpunk. I've gotten through like the opening section, and I've met Johnny Silverhand, Silverarm, right? So now I'm in the thick of it. Silverhand. So I'm living the Cyberpunk dream.
Cool.
So what did you have game wise?
Yeah, so I did not come into this room almost at all during the week that I was away, which is unfortunately a sure sign that I was starting to burn out. So it was good for me to get out of the office, and so I played a little bit on the Steam Deck, but I finally played something that's not in the notes, which is Invisible Hours, which is a VR game where you are watching the interplay between a whole bunch of different people, Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and other people who are at Tesla's house. Theoretically, it's Wardenclyffe. There's been a murder. And so you have to solve that murder and uncover the mysteries of the house. You can watch each chapter. It's kind of like they say it's more like a play than a game, is the way they describe it. But you can watch each chapter. You can rewind time and then follow somebody else through different parts of the house and watch them and listen to their dialogues and such like that, find clues in the area. And that was a lot of fun. Aaron had been on me for like 6 months of like, hey, why don't you play it? Why don't you play that game? And it was a lot of fun. And so it kind of broke things open to play other things. Like we played another, it was like a 2-player game that was like solving puzzles, but I don't remember what it was now. But we kind of got onto a puzzle solving thing, and she got stuck on Sexy Brutale, which is made or published by the same people who made Invisible Hours. And it's a very different look and feel. It's like not top down, but it's more 2D-ish sort of thing. And it's preventing people from getting murdered in a Groundhog Day style game. You wake up, this spirit reincarnates you or wakes you up or something. There's a whole mystery around that. And you see someone get shot. And then after they get shot, time rewinds to the beginning of the day. And so you're able to like peek through peepholes and go through the mansion and stuff. But if any other occupant of the mansion sees you, they all have masks on, as do you. And so like there's something mystical about it that the mask will fly up and try and kill you. Oh, thus restarting your day. So you cannot be seen by other people. And so that's why you're like peeking through peepholes and stuff. So your first task is to prevent the person who was shot from actually getting shot. Gotcha. And then when you do that, it opens up more of the house. And then you find out that another group of people are killed. And so you have to prevent their deaths, et cetera, et cetera.
Sounds fantastic.
Aaron was having trouble with it. And it's not technically 2-player, but we sat on the couch and I had the controller and we were both brainstorming. It's like, well, what if we do this? Well, what if we pull that lever? Well, what if we go to this room over here before this guy comes in, blah, 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 blah. And it was a lot of fun. So I recommend that game. That it's an older-ish game, like 4 or 5 years ago, I think maybe. Okay. I also recommend Invisible Hours. That was another really good one. If you happen to have VR, I think there's a non-VR version of it, but the VR version I liked because you could look around the room and like reach out and kind of pick up, the piece of paper and read it and things like that.
Yeah. I can see how that would be more compelling.
And then my daughter Isleen, she had bought me a game a year or 2 ago called Tick Tock, A Tale for Two. And actually she bought 2 copies, one for her, one for me. And it's a co-op game, but it's a strange co-op game. It is not a networked co-op game. You pick if you are player 1 or player 2. And so if you are player 1, you get one half of the puzzle that needs to be solved, and player 2 gets the other half of the puzzle that needs to be solved. And you have to talk back and forth, describing what you're seeing, saying what you're doing, and then trying to brainstorm between the two of you what the solutions for each of the puzzles are.
Cool.
And the story here is that you're searching for what happened to this woman's missing sister. And so you're going through and you're kind of like pulled back in time and step through different years of their life. And then you have to solve puzzles through that whole thing. She and I played it on Steam Deck. She played it on her laptop, sitting on the couch, but it's entirely possible to like have someone here and a friend on Discord and you're just talking back and forth, and you don't need any sort of network connection to do it, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool. Yeah. Definitely. In non-gaming developments, so I mentioned running in the dark. That was because the college I work at, the gym goes under reduced hours during January break. So I was off between Christmas and New Year's, and now the college is open for interim, but it's at a greatly reduced schedule. And so I showed up at the gym, and they're like, "Hey, we're closing the gym." Like, oh. Okay, so I guess I'll go up to the quad and run in the dark. So it's not the complete dark. It's a college quad, so it's pretty well illuminated. And the cool thing this year is they went and they put up all of these Christmas lights, white Christmas lights on all the trees. So it's actually a very beautiful, very relaxing kind of calming jog, because it's very warm here right now. I think it was like 55 while I was running.
You definitely don't want to be running in the cold and iciness.
No. I mean, I did that when we were preparing for Philmont. I have run on the same quad when it was 20 degrees out, because when you got to run, you got to run. But that was a very different challenge. But tonight, it was nice. Just kind of soaking in the Christmas lights, and it's foggy here too, right? So it was a very kind of sort of quasi mystical, surreal experience to just like run in circles around the quad. So that's cool. That's why I'm running in the dark. We'll see once the gym goes to regular hours. Hopefully, I can get back in on the indoor track. But I like to run outdoors. But in the winter, it's just too difficult to run. I will not run on the street in the dark, because that's just how you get hit by cars or fall in potholes or whatever.
Yeah. Twisted ankle.
One broken ankle in a lifetime is more than enough for me. So that's all I need. Well, we had a fuzzy furry development named Forest. So we are seeing iPuppy, who I believe I mentioned on the last podcast, our new one has arrived. He was Puppy F. And so his name is Forest. I think his brother is Fonzie. Can't remember what his sister's name was, but in any case, they're all F puppies. He is ridiculously cute. He's actually pretty well behaved for a 7-week-old puppy. He's a golden retriever, and he is just so amazingly fuzzy. I took him for a walk this morning around the block, and because it's been raining, he came back. He weighs about 7 pounds, maybe 8 at this point. You would think, to look at him, he's like 13 pounds, because it's all just fluff. And so you come back, and he's just like a sponge that's just soaked up all of the water as we walked around the neighborhood. So it's going to be a bit of a different experience having a dog with long hair, but
gotcha.
We'll make it through.
maybe one of these streams that Forrest could visit.
Yes. Yeah. I think maybe next time. The game room was Holiday Central. And so this is where we wrapped all the presents. And although you can't see it, and that's tactical, there are piles of stuff everywhere, and it would be horrible for him to be here right now. But he is super duper cute. He's pretty well behaved, and we're still working on house training. We only got him on Tuesday of last week, so we've been steadily kind of.
You said what?
It's
7 weeks old.
7 weeks old.
Yeah.
So we usually have him housebroken within it depends, 2 to 4 weeks. Hank, our second
housebreaking dogs.
We do. The key is, if they get that look in their eye, you go and do something.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with toddlers.
You don't wait.
Right. It's like, will he, won't he? Yes, he will. And even if he doesn't, you just need to get him outside before something happens. So I'm taking him to work tomorrow. So we'll see how well that goes, because we're on the 4th floor of a office building. So the key is getting him downstairs as quickly as possible.
Yes.
When he wakes up from whatever nap he takes.
That young, I imagine there isn't a timing that you can go.
No,
hey,
it's mostly
an hour. Let's go out.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like when you're first starting, it's every 15 minutes. If he's awake, you just take him out. Whether he needs to go or not, you just take him out. Then it turns out he's got a fair amount. He sleeps through the night. We've had puppies that got up every 2 hours to go to the bathroom. He just sleeps. He slept until 8:30 during Christmas break. And we're like, wow, this dog is amazing. So we shall see. I don't have very many meetings tomorrow. I'm going to be in the office, so it's a good opportunity to get him out into the world and see what's what. So
cool. Very cool.
So we have a plan. We have a master plan.
We do have a master
that involves
plan.
maps.
we've talked over the past couple seasons about wandering into different parts of the layer, things like that. And we thought it would be a good idea to have a map. I mean, yeah, there are some parts of the layer that shift and move and things like that. But, given the fact that our layer is the remnants of an earlier, shall we say, secret layer, that we should probably map out all the rooms that we have and were created at some point, and we've created. So we're going to participate in the hashtag Dungeon 23 as much as we can. I have a post ready to go. Given the fact that we're recording this on the 3rd, we're already several days behind. So par for the course for us. And so, but we'll be posting it on lairofsecrets.com, maybe on Mastodon and Twitter. The idea is for the Dungeon 23 challenge, it's to write a single dungeon room per day, and then every month is one level of the dungeon. And so like all of January, we'll have 31 rooms. Theoretically, that will be level 1 of our layer. And then February becomes like level 2 or sub basement 2, however you want to organize things. And so at the end of the year, if you've done this the whole time, you will have 365 rooms and a 12 level mega dungeon. Some of the suggestions are, don't write a 5-page description for each room. You're just going to burn yourself out. You could just say, hey, there's 5 goblins and 15 silver pieces in this room here. And the person who, I don't know if he created it or if he's just really promoting the idea, I think he created it, is pushing really hard for don't burn yourself out with it. Go ahead and use generators. Go ahead and use prompts, etc., to do whatever you need to do. We might do that. I also think that we'll probably be mining some rooms that we did come up with in the old Secret Lair blog and podcast. I do know that we have a Shetland bonobo cross hybrid enclosure. I don't know if the Shetland bonobos are still there. Natalie had some very good artistic renderings of the Shetland bonobos back in those days. So, and actually we should throw those links up. She brought all of her old web comics and other things like that back. Like Radio Isopod was a spin-off from this layer, from the Secret Lair, and a couple of other things like that. And the Overlord's Notebook, I believe it is another one that some of us had participated in. And so there's a bunch of sketches from her there as well. So we'll probably post a few of those too.
Cool. Yeah, I had thought I was on the fence. And I think with 2 of us playing it, we'll have to actually talk about how we want to draw the rooms and stuff. But I had thought about doing it because I'm in very cyberpunk headspace, doing an arcology.
Yes.
Right. And each layer being a different layer of the arcology. And I had just watched Dread for the first time. And
the Carl Urban one.
Yes.
That's I love that one.
Yes. And the idea that you're moving through the levels and the thread. So I was thinking maybe not so much because arcologies are supposed to be huge and sprawling, right? They're
sure.
Not just cities, but mega cities onto themselves. And so you could have each month basically being a district within the arcology, right? So it's most layers 1 through 20, levels 1 through 20, and just keep moving on through the arcology. Yep. The idea of having to generate that many ideas for a cyberpunk arcology seemed daunting.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where you could do a little, had we started earlier, we could have done a little bit of planning in December.
Planning.
Yeah. But if we're going to do the layer, I think we're good with, the silly, goofy things that we've done before. I mean, the so serious research and development that we do.
Yes. The bar is lower, I think.
Yeah. And we've made some rooms as well, so we can cannibalize those and actually make them official and put them on the map.
We have lots of fodder.
We do. But speaking of maps, there are things that are also very map-like when you look at them from a certain point of view, called board games. And we wanted to talk about board games today, and some of our favorite ones. Some of you, as we're recording this or streaming this, may actually still be on vacation. Probably by the time it comes out, you probably won't be. Maybe you will. Maybe it'll be summer vacation by the time this comes out. But we'll see.
Hopefully we'll do slightly better than that, but yes.
I hope so. It's mainly my fault for not getting them edited fast. But we wanted to talk about board games, and one of yours, which is also mine, is Settlers of Catan is at the top of the list here. It's one of those that my family played a fair amount, like so much so that we haven't played it in a long time because we overplayed it. But I think if I pulled it out, on a rainy Saturday, we would probably play it again.
Yeah. Yeah. So Settlers of Catan, to describe it, is it's a hex tile based game, and so you randomly lay out the various tiles that represents different kinds of terrain. So mountains, plains, grasslands. There's one or two others that I can't remember off the top of my head, and they generate different resources, right? So like the farm fields is one. They generate wheat. The mountains generate ore. Forests generates wood.
Yep.
So you use these resources. You basically at the start of the game, you place a single village at the intersection of one of these hexes, and each hex has a number associated with it. 1 or 2 through 12. And so you roll 2d6, and if your number comes up on that particular hex, say the hex is a 6, cool, you get wood. And then eventually you get enough wood, and because you made mistakes when laying out your game and choosing your places, you have way too much wood, but that's okay because somebody else made their own mistake and now they have entirely too much sheep, and now you must trade wood for sheep, or vice versa, so that you can build roads and additional cities and what have you. So it's a very social game. There's a lot of trading going on. There's a long game and a short game. So basically, like, to begin with, you're trying to figure out like how to place your villages so that you can maximize getting the resources. But really, in the long game, you're trying to figure out, how am I going to grow? How many players are there? How are their settlements going to impinge on my settlements? And how can I gather the resources I need to build what I need to build?
Right. So you also have certain things like, in terms of that long game, longest road. Yes. You have to make sure that you're able to build a long road that isn't cut off by somebody else. And that is a strategic piece, is like, oh, I see that person's trying to make a really long road. I'm going to build a village right here so it breaks their road up. And so they can't get longest road.
Yes, and it teaches about probability, because basically the way that the hexes go, so it goes from 2 to 12, right? And so if you roll 2d6, the most common number you're going to get is actually a 7, and there's a mechanic for that, which is the robber. If you roll a 7, you get a robber. You get to move it to somebody else's hex and steal a resource from them, and then it also blocks the generation of new resources off of said hex, right? So you can block, somebody's generating lots of wood. That's okay. I'm going to put the robber on there, and they're not going to be able to do that anymore. But if you have a hex that's got 2 on it, it's not going to come up that often. But because of how the game kind of lays out in the beginning, and because every game is different, you might still choose that 2, because you know what? That's your best chance of getting ore, and you need ore to build cities, right? And you become very popular because for some reason 2 gets hot and you generate a bunch of ore, and you're the only person with ore in the game, even if there's only 1, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting. There's a lot of options. We played the heck out of it in the late 90s. I think it was the first Euro game that my gaming group, the Black Razors, really got into. And what I find amazing is like the legs on this thing have been so impressive. My daughter and her friends at college, this is their go-to game. Like every weekend they're playing Settlers of Catan.
Gotcha.
They came home for break. My son's like, hey, don't we have Settlers of Catan at my in-laws' house? And we're like, yeah, no, we haven't bought that for them yet. So I guess we're going to have to fix that.
Yeah, it's we got our copy in the early 2000s, maybe 2010. Actually, no, it was the early 2000s. When the Game Master show was going on, we'd have people over, we'd have friends over and stuff. And then we had kids. And so eventually they started playing as well. When we had it, we would usually have 5 or 6 people over. So we have the 5-6 player expansions for Settlers. And then we also wanted, there's Settlers of Catan, and then there's some extra expansions, which is Seafarers of Catan. And I think it's called Cities of Catan. what is that one?
There's been several. There was Cities and Nights.
Cities and Nights. That's what it was.
Which I think it's called something different now because they've come up with different versions. All of mine are like the originals from like the late 90s, early aughts. So I don't actually know what they're calling them at this point.
Yeah, and the Cities and Nights version that we have, I like to play with it because it felt to me like a board game version of Civ, where you could increase the tech level of your character, of your group, your villages. And that was a lot of fun. And we played the heck out of that. So like I've got at least 6 boxes because Cities and Nights, Seafarers, and Settlers of Catan, and the 5 and 6 player expansions for each of them.
Yes. Yeah. Same deal. They're here somewhere.
Yep.
I think this is the RPG wall, so they're not behind me, but so yeah, that's a great one. Another one that we've been playing for almost as long is Carcassone. So Carcassone is a tile-based game. Are you familiar with Carcassone?
I am familiar with Carcassone. The scoring for Carcassone was always so off-putting that I never I even have it for I have it on Steam, and I still can't quite grasp how to score that game.
So so again, it's another like Euro style game. So it has a long game and a short game. And so with this one, you're placing tiles. And so it's almost like putting together a puzzle. Each tile, the one I'm actually most familiar with is a one-off they did called Hunters and Gatherers, where the scoring is actually a little simpler.
Okay.
Baseline Carcassone, you're trying to complete different villages. The game takes its name from a village in France. And the idea is that you're trying to complete these castles. And when you complete them, the number of tiles that the castle is comprised of, like if it's 6 tiles, if the castle appears on 6 tiles, that's worth like 6 points. Or maybe 12. I don't remember. To your point, there's math.
Yep.
There's also roads. So it's kind of like in Catan, you're trying to score longer roads. So you can get easy points by like completing your road quickly, or you can get longer points by trying to go for a very long segmented road. But somebody might steal that from you. It depends on the
because you lay down tiles. And everybody lays down their own tile. And so they could be helping you build a long road, but you also have a certain number of little meeples that you place on different features. And that's kind of like a bet. That's like, right. I think this road is going to be worth a lot of points, so I'm going to claim it. But as soon as you claim it, other people are going to try and make it worth not as many points as you want it to be.
Right. Or connect their road to your road, so that you have to split the points.
Right.
Or end up with like 2 people on their road, and so it overwhelms. Like it gets complicated. It can get complicated.
Yeah.
There's also like there's a monastery mechanic where you're trying to like collect all the tiles around a particular monastery. There are gazillion expansions for it. I've only played a handful of them at Gen Con because my wife prefers Hunters and Gatherers. And I got to say, like, Hunters and Gatherers as a couples game has been our go-to game for the last like 20 something years. Like nice. We get together on a Saturday night, we're just going to chill. We play some Carcassonne, you have a glass of wine. It's a lot of fun. We don't play to screw each other over. Like
right.
we usually just play like a fairly nice game that's just very conversational. And the great thing about it was, although we had to keep track of the math, and I don't think the math is too daunting. I think if you've played with someone who knows the game, it's easier to learn it.
Right.
It is a game that you have to play once before you can understand the strategy of the game. You're not going to get it until after you've played it once, or maybe 3 times, 5 times, whatever. But the cool thing about it was we could play it with toddlers, right? Like my daughter and my son, both when they were like 2-3 years old, like it's just a puzzle, right? So all they're trying to do is match up the pieces. And so you could sit there with like my daughter on my lap, and she would like figure out where she wanted to put it. And then you just go with it, right? Because we're not really playing to win. We're just playing.
Right.
And so she's kind of playing her game and we're playing our game. And it's been one of the truly great family games for my family.
Very cool. Yeah. Speaking of the not so competitive, when we play Settlers of Catan and someone rolls a 7, we put the robber in the desert. Like he just stays there. It's just like, nope. Like there is enough competition without the robber stealing that we don't, like, it's one of those things, especially when we were playing when the girls were much younger, you would either be stealing from your kid or you'd always be stealing from your spouse. And, none of that plays very well in our household. So, so we basically got rid of the robber. There was enough strategy and competition in Settlers for that. So, with Carcassone, that I would have loved to have had that had I understood how to score it in terms of, as with the kids being young, just having it be like basically like a pattern matching game or puzzle game where you're like creating a pattern and you can only put the tiles down if they match, like geomorphs for making dungeons. You can't have a dungeon run off into, a wall. It has to either go to a dead end or go to a door or whatever. Yeah, that would have been cool to have Carcassone back when they were little.
Yeah. So as the kids have gotten older, I have to be clear, like, kind of benevolent only gets you so far. And so my son in particular likes to mess with people, and he will go after us to try and get to steal people's meadows and try and steal people's roads, or like in Hunters and Gatherers, it's forests. And if you complete a forest, you get this gold piece, which allows you to draw a special piece. And he's all about the special pieces. So there was that time from when he was like 9 through 12 where he got like that competitive edge really going.
Gotcha.
So it's been fun, but it's always been fun, and nobody was crying.
Yes.
And it was understood that, like, we only mess with him so much, right? Like, we make sure that he knows. It's kind of like, it's like having a puppy.
Yes.
Right. It's like, oh, you're going to do that. Oh, well, I'm going to steal your meadow. How does that feel? Okay, well, let's back off here. Let's not go to DEFCON 5. So. Yep.
I see that on our list is one that we both enjoy, but I have not played in years and years, which is Arkham Horror.
Which is the opposite of the family-friendly game.
Yes, I have not. Not in terms of like content per se, but it is lots of little fiddly bits, as you've written down here, and it's a co-op game, but you don't always win. Even if you have perfect strategy, you still can lose,
and often.
Yeah, we used to play this with my friends when I lived back in Illinois, with the Game Master Show group and a few others. We would spend hours and hours playing this game. Have never played it with the girls. So
to describe it, it is set in the village of the town of Arkham, Massachusetts, the setting of many of H.P. Lovecraft's tales, and you are investigators trying to stop some great old one from appearing, right? And so there are various things that might be like there are themed expansions that give rise to like the King in Yellow or Innsmouth, like the deep ones rising from the sea. Like there's various mechanics that kind of give it more flavor. But at the end of the day, there is a great old one who is attempting to invade Arkham and like end the world. And so you're trying to stop them. And so there are like I say, you say there is a gazillion fiddly bits. This is a game when like the first edition, when you break it out, it takes a half an hour for me to set it up because there's a lot of little pieces and you have to be organized and you have to put it away organized or you're going to spend 2 hours setting it up.
Yep.
So it's very important to manage your Arkham. Yep. And my friends and I have played it so many times over the years that like we actually got good at it. Like we understand the rules well enough. Now we haven't played it since the pandemic. I'm hoping that we can knock it out in January, but like it got fun.
Yeah.
We enjoyed the complexity.
Yeah. It's one of those where you can enjoy the complexity of it. We had it was less than half an hour to set up. Like Gloomhaven feels hard, like a lot more setup than Arkham Horror ever was. But then again, I think I had like paper crafted custom tuck boxes and things like that for all the different types of cards and things like that. So that helped a lot of like, oh, just put it all in this box. And then when you need it, just pull this box out. As Chris Miller was saying, he always loved the idea of Arkham Horror, but the execution he did not like. I'm not sure what he means by the execution. I'm supposing it's not not the execution of the characters in the game or people at the table. But with Arkham Horror, you never know.
8 hours of game.
8 hours of game.
This is he calls it out. So it is. This is like my friends and I, when we play this, everybody knows they're in for the long haul. This is not the board game that you break out and you're just like, hey, let's play a little Arkham Horror, right? It's a commitment.
Yeah.
You're there for the long haul. Like when my group plays it, we usually play with 5 to 6 players, maybe 4 to 6 players. We don't usually go beyond 7. And so it usually takes us 4 to 6 hours to complete a game, but we got good at it. And we, once we start playing it again, we realize like we could actually do it and get through in a fairly timely manner. But again, a timely manner is 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe 8 if things get into certain dark places.
And yes, the amount of time commitment is pretty intense. It's not nearly as intense as Twilight Imperium per se. It can be really long. The game also has one other flaw, which many other co-op games have this same flaw. Gloomhaven has the same flaw. Pandemic has the same flaw, which is on our list next, actually, which is one person can go, oh, I have the perfect strategy. You need to go here. You need to go here. You over there. Right. You need to go here. And then it basically becomes, it's like, well, we're just going to go have dinner. Why don't you play the game by yourself?
Right.
And so you do have to be careful about that. And again, some of this may be the rose colored glasses. We have not played in probably a decade for Arkham Horror, but it was still I still really enjoyed it. And if we got together, as a group and say, hey, anybody want to play Arkham Horror? I would say yes.
Yeah, it's I think because we got good at it, we're familiar with the expansions. We played all of the expansions at this point. That just made it easier. And I think we didn't run into the trap of like the one person directing things, right? There's usually enough give and take, and there's usually enough give and take without anybody getting upset, because it is a collaborative game, and there is this tension, especially when things are starting to go off the rails, where you can kind of get in each other's faces, so you want to be friends. It's not like the board game level of like backstabbing, right? Because there isn't a backstabbing mechanic. Like
you won't lose you. Yeah, you won't lose your friends like you will with diplomacy.
Right. Right. Diplomacy is not on the list.
No, diplomacy is not on the list. I've played like 2 or 3 games of diplomacy, and like I played one game and it's like, I don't like this game. And then I forgot what diplomacy was. And then a different friend of mine was like, hey, do you want to try diplomacy? And then I realized, no, I do not like this game. Yeah, like I said, I would play Arkham Horror again. I know Mur Lafferty, she was really big into Arkham Horror and the different stuff, but some of the expansions made the game so hard that she got really frustrated with it.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's not that it made the game hard to play. It not necessarily impossible to win, but very unlikely to win due to random card shuffling.
Right.
And that's not as fun when you're already doing it like a strategic game.
Yeah, and I would say, like, if you walk up to a con, you're like, ooh, Ken and David talked about Arkham, I should play it. And if it's like, we're going to be playing Arkham and we're going to use all the expansions, do not play that game.
Okay.
For me, what I have found is one expansion works. Yeah. Right. Like maybe one of the small little decky expansions will also give you a little bit more flavor, but the complexity is too much. You cannot some people think it's great. That's
the idea of it, I think, is great, because it's like, oh, you're in Arkham. That's the main board. You could go there's a place with like a train station that's like on an outskirts of Arkham. There's the other realm, the outer worlds, where you can go like to the library, not the Library of Lang. That's Magic the Gathering. But like like a couple of the different outer realms, other worldly places, the Dreamlands, etc. Yeah. And then you can go to Antarctica in one of the expansions, or was that one of the homebrew expansions that I might have picked up.
Might be a homebrew expansion.
Okay.
There is a second edition of it. I haven't played it. My friends played it. They didn't like it. I think the next time we play, we're going to do the first edition again.
Yeah.
But that's Arkham.
Sorry, well, speaking of homebrew, we did do 2 homebrew characters that I found on Board Game Geek. There was Alan Quartermain. This was shortly after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen had come out, and so it was Sean Connery, and they did it in the Arkham card style, so I was able to print it out in color on cardstock. And then the other one, which could probably be considered its own Eldritch horror, was SpongeBob SquarePants. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So another collaborative game that I enjoy is, and I think we both enjoy, is Pandemic.
Yeah.
Pandemic is another sort of like, I think, gateway game to get people into things other than Monopoly. Like if you think Monopoly is a great game, if you think Sorry is a great game, we have better games, people, and we can have them play them. And the great thing about Pandemic is you are playing CDC investigators. Well, maybe not so much investigators, like a response team that is dealing with outbreaks of different pandemic viruses around the world. And your goal is to try and manage all of these viruses while finding cures. And then the cures allow you to eradicate the virus. And then eventually that allows you to save the world. The game has some 2 cool like clock mechanics, right? So built into the decks, there's a outbreak card. And if that outbreak card comes up, then the virus expands more rapidly. Which can spell doom very quickly, depending on how quickly those cards come up. There is a spacing mechanic and how you're supposed to spread out the cards, but you can draw poorly depending on how things got shuffled.
Yes.
And then the outbreaks cause 1 clock to advance, and if you get to the end of that clock, then the game ends. And then the other one is if you run.
And that outbreak clock, because it causes viruses to replicate basically in the cities, or in the different locations, if there's too many viruses, that means the viruses spread to other locations, which also, I believe, ticks up that same clock that says the viruses win.
Yes, and then you can also lose if you run out of virus.
Yes, if you run out of
virus to put on the board.
There's basically you get little cubes of different colors. And I think, is it 4 or 5 different colors?
I think it's,
but there's a fixed number of each one. Yeah, there's a fixed number of each one. And if you run out of a particular color, game over.
Yeah. And so what happens is that when outbreaks happen, you stack up the blocks. And so to begin with, there might be 1 block on a particular country or location, like London, right? And so as you're drawing cards, and that's showing you where additional viruses are showing up. And so if a second virus shows up in London, well, you put another block there. And then if there's 3, and then you draw it yet again, it explodes and contaminates all of the surrounding cities. And so if those also happen to have 3, then things escalate rather quickly. Yep. And what makes it cool is that each person has a character that breaks the rules in a particular way, right? So you have a medic, like basically you can spend a turn to get rid of 1 virus. The medic can choose to spend a turn to get rid of all viruses in a city, right? So the medic is very powerful where you want to move them to. There's a logistics person, which allows him to pull or push people to different locations. And so each person has a vital role that needs to happen. But to your earlier point about Arkham, you can end up with the mastermind who's like, everybody stop, I know what to do, right? And you're just telling other people how to move. And so the game works best when you're coming together to talk about what our strategies should be to get through the next turn.
Yeah. And as long as everybody is like coming together and agreeing, yes, that plan is the one we should follow, rather than someone just dictating it is a whole other thing. And well, the last 2 years, we haven't really played it.
This is true.
Ironically, I was going to put it down on the list and then saw you had already put it down on the list because I was out at dinner with my girls tonight. And I was like, what were your favorite board games? And they listed Pandemic as one of them. So they do enjoy it, and they're like, we haven't played that in a while. It's like, yeah. And they're like, oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So famously, I've told this story before on the podcast. I caused the pandemic because I got Pandemic Legacy, and we played it over Christmas break 2019 to 2020. And we played like 2 or 3 rounds of it to get people learning how to play Pandemic. And lo and behold, 3 months later, we had the virus that we had unleashed from the box spread throughout the entirety of the world. Right. And then nobody wanted to play Pandemic Legacy anymore.
Well, we're all playing Pandemic Legacy right now.
We are playing Pandemic Legacy because Pandemic Legacy is a darker version of the game. Like choices made in one game carry over into the next game. And I think we're talking about doing legacy games in a future episode, so I won't get into it too deeply, but cities can fall, riots can happen, bad things like New York has been wiped off the map because of rampaging viruses and what have you. And that just seemed like a little too dark for the pandemic.
Yeah. Yep. On the lighter side of things, and I may be breaking the board game rule here,
that's okay.
I really enjoy, there's a particular company out there called Hunt a Killer. I think that there are more out there, but I haven't found them. So if anybody out there knows of another company that does games like this, I would love to know about them. But they're basically a murder mystery in a box. The first one I got, Aaron had gotten it for me. It's called Murder by the Dozen. And it was basically like a Great British Bake Off, or Hell's Kitchen wouldn't be the right one, but basically it's like a bunch of contestants are in a baking show, and one of the judges has had a death threat against them, and you're trying to figure out which of the contestants and I think maybe one of the other, like 1 or 2 of the crew, is trying to kill that particular person. And so you're brought in as an outside investigator, and it's kind of like an escape room ish thing in a box, where you have things like ciphers, you have stuff like ripped up pieces of paper that you have to put them all together and figure out their stuff before. I may have mentioned this sort of thing before. One of the latest ones was, there was an actual physical wooden box with a combination lock on it that we had to use other clues to figure out what the combination was, to open the box, to get more clues that were in that box. They all take between an hour to 2 to 3 hours, depending upon their complexity and how many people and how good they are at solving puzzles.
Gotcha.
We at once did like one for like 2 hours, and we're like, okay, let's stop for the night. Let's put everything away. We make murder boards on, of like who each suspect is and everything like that. So we'd done all of that. And it's like, okay, well, let's go to bed for the night. It's late. And then we got up, and then the next evening was like, okay, well, let's continue. And then like 10 minutes later, we had the killer. So we were like 10 minutes away from solving the puzzle the night before, but we were all really, really tired. So, but yeah, I think we've gotten 3 or 4 of them now. One of them is in shrink wrap, waiting to be opened. We have his lean back home from college for the rest of this week, so we may pull that one out.
Nice. I will say that reminds me of a game my group used to play we played it several times and we enjoyed it. It was Mystery of the Abbey. It came out, I think, in 1995. I'm not sure when we played it because I see that there's like translated editions of it. It's another Euro game, and it would be on those lists of, you see, do you like Monopoly? Play Acquire instead, right? This would be, you like Clue? Play Mystery of the Abbey instead, because the setup is you are monks and there has been a murder in the Abbey and you need to figure out who did it. And it's like a more complex clue, but it's a similar sort of like go and find all the clues as a board game type thing. But it's got like funny rules. So one of them is like you draw a card that requires you to sing for the rest of the turn. Like you can speak, but you have to, everything that you say has to be in like, the monkish chant.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like playing Monty Python Flux. And if you want to draw an extra card, you have to sing part of a Monty Python song.
Yeah, I think it was interesting. Like there were these different, like there was another thing where like for the rest of the turn, you have taken a vow of silence and you may not speak.
Oh, geez.
Right. And so it was fun. Like I'm nostalgic for it now as you talk about murder mysteries. But if you like Clue and you're looking for something that's a little bit more adult, right? Like it's got some more complexity to it. Check out Mystery at the Abbey.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of your Vow of Silence part reminded me of the original Aeon edition of Cosmic Encounters. There's been several editions since then, but I still think the Aeon edition, especially the way that we played it, was the best. One of the powers was silencer, and you could silence another player, and they could not communicate for the rest of that turn. Like they couldn't make gestures. They couldn't even say, I'm done with my turn. And basically that game kind of in some ways encouraged bending / breaking / cheating.
Yes. No, it definitely encouraged.
And so you could be like, oh, are you done? Then they can't say anything. And so you just start your turn. I missed that game.
Yeah, I played one of the re-released versions at Gen Con in like the late 90s. I think it was when it might have been. I'm trying to remember.
Avalon Hill,
like
it was either Avalon Hill or Fantasy Flight, I think, did it. And I have a copy of that one, and it was just not the same.
No,
for me.
No. I've heard legends of the original, but never played.
Yeah. And we used to play with 2 powers, and they'd both start face down, which meant you had no powers, but you could reveal them at any time. Like normally you can put 4 of your armies in what's called the cone to like attack a planet. But if you were the Macron, each of your tokens counts as 4 tokens. But the disadvantage is you can only put 1 of your tokens in the cone. Anyone else would put 4 and it would count as 4. You could put 1 and it would count as 4. But with the way we played, if you were face down, you would put 4 tokens in the cone. Then you would reveal Macron. And so you would have effectively 16 tokens in the cone.
We did. And I think we could do future episodes where we talk about games that we have loved.
Yes.
But Illuminati, Steve Jackson Games.
We
would do a similar thing with the different Illuminati. We'd play face down Illuminati, and so you wouldn't know what things were, and you could cheat and just use anybody's power until such time, and you could like vary your power abilities until such time as like I think each turn you could use one of your actions to call out somebody else and say, "I think you're this." And then you would actually have to play by the rules. There's
actually right now. And it's one of those things, is it a card game or is it a board game sort of thing? Actually, I'll bump it to our card game list, but Red Dragon Inn is a good one that was also mentioned by my daughters. This one, I can't remember the name of it, but you have 2 cards. Those cards are 2 different royal type people. You know, you go around, you collect money during your turn, et cetera, but you can also then try and assassinate your opponent's characters. And your opponent may be somebody else at the table each time. You know, it depends. Like your goal is to get to the end of the game and everyone else is dead. Your cards are face down. And so you can pretend that you have a particular card, even if you don't, but then someone can call you on it and you have to flip the card up if they've called you on it. And if you're correct, something happens. And if they're correct, you know, something else happens. I played the game once or twice and it was a lot of fun, but it is also one of those very competitive games. So if you're more on the co-op side, if your pendulum swings more co-op, this is not a game that you probably want to play. It's much more toward what was the game you said earlier? It was the very, very competitive game that ruins friendships.
Oh, diplomacy.
Yeah, it's not quite diplomacy. It's not quite diplomacy level, but it could get to diplomacy level. And just like the old Cosmic Encounters is definitely on the competitive side, but but you play it enough and the games go fast enough that you don't really it's like I am going to lose and it is 2 more hours until I finish this game. Like
Right.
You know, it's not that feeling. It's like, I am going to lose. Oh, the game's over. Let's play again.
Right,
you know.
right. I would like to suggest that one of the rooms in the Lair of Secrets is the diplomacy room, and the diplomacy room is just like a concrete filled room with diplomacy at the center.
Sure,
like
sure.
We just sealed it in so that no one will ever play diplomacy because you just can't get to it.
Yeah, probably with a bunch of skeletons in there with knives in their back.
Yes, all the people who were metaphysically murdered while playing diplomacy.
Yes.
So another cool game that you have down here, which I love, although it runs into the complexity factor depending on how many expansions you're playing with, is Sentinels of the Multiverse, which is a card game, collaborative card game. I love it.
Yeah. Like it kind of depends on how you view. I mean, yes, it's all made up of cards, but there's also a bunch of tokens. And there's a bunch of status tokens and other things like that. So
there are lots of fiddly bits.
Yeah, there's lots of fiddly bits that go along with it. And so it is hard to say if it's a full card game, but it's probably a card game.
So the way that it plays is each person has a deck of cards, and that deck of cards represents a character. So, for example, Tachyon is a female speedster. Think the Flash. The Wraith is she is
female
like
Batman
equivalent. Female Batman. There is, oh my gosh, I play this game so much, and now there's Benchmark, which is kind of he's an Iron Man analog where he has lots of fiddly bits, lots of like power ups for his armor. Like it's a complex character because you have to figure out how to play the cards in order to get him to power up. And so as the game goes along, each person is controlling a deck. You have a hand, and each turn you can play one of your cards. And so that might be an equipment card. So in Benchmark's case, he has cards that give him like armor or allow him to allow somebody else to draw 2 cards or somebody else to use a power. You have cards that are a power. So you might be able, there's like, Legacy, who's like the Captain America analog. He has a power that grants everybody else +1 to their attacks. He has another power that protects him from all kinds of a certain type of energy, type of attack. So the types of attacks are all of your comic book classics like cosmic energy and projectiles and melee and toxic and what have you. And he can protect you from that. He can protect himself from that using this evolution card. And then he has other cards that are like ongoing cards that allow him to, so in Legacy's case, you can play a card that's redirection, which allows you, somebody else just got hit with toxic damage. Well, I'm protected from toxic damage, so I'll redirect the toxic damage to me. Right. And so he's great at buffing other people and helping other people.
He's great at buffing and tanking.
Leader. Yeah. Buffing and tanking. Whereas Tachyon is all about playing basically what are instants, right? Like they're one-shot cards that you play. She can do a whole bunch of damage. Some of her cards, she does more damage based on the number of discards that she has in her discard deck. Yeah.
And there's like cards that allow you to play more cards, so you can kind of chain all those things together. The different heroes can play off of each other. Like different heroes work really well with other heroes. You know, like Legacy can give some protection to other people or redirect damage to themselves so that he can protect some of the squishier people, but those squishier people can basically be given enough time to power up to really hit something really hard.
Right. Because there is the short term boom, boom, boom. I'm playing a lot of quick cards. And the great thing is that the different decks in the game let you play to what you want to do. So if you're the guy or the girl or whomever who really wants to, like, you like the long game, right? You love the complexity of having all of those fiddly bit components out there. Cool. Benchmark is for you. It's going to take you 6 rounds to get to the point where Benchmark is really able to do some damage, but he's got cool things and his cards play off of one another, and there's a lot of complexity, and that's great. And if you're like, but Ken, all I want to do is hit things, that's great. There's a character named Haka. He is basically the Hulk.
Yeah.
And Haka smash. And every turn, like, he gets out a club, he gets out like different sorts of like equipment things, but it's all about smashing things.
Yep.
And you can do damage every round, which is fine because Benchmark can help you do that more often.
Yep. And so each of you has your own character, you form a super team, but you have to fight something. So
yes,
you have a villain deck, and that villain, as you are, a villain has a certain amount of hit points, but also they have their own powers. And so every round everybody does their own thing, but also the villain then gets to go. And there are rules for how often and how many cards you pull off the villain deck. And villains have minions, villains have superpowers, villains have gadgets, all sorts of things. And of course, villains and superheroes have to fight in a place. And so there's an environment. And so that environment, you could be playing in the big city. You could be playing on Dinosaur Island, or the equivalent of Dinosaur Island. You could be playing on Mars, and each of those different locations have different things that benefit the heroes, different things that go against the heroes, and different things that basically affect everybody at the table, depending upon how things go. And then, yes. As you get more expansions, you get more access to more heroes, more villains, and there's kind of like a story arc, a comic book story arc that goes through all of these different expansions, ending in the biggest expansion, which I have played once at Gen Con and but have not played since then, because we played Sentinels of the Multiverse so much that most of my family doesn't want to play it anymore, called Oblivion. Where you have to defend the universe against the villain who is trying to destroy the universe, or destroy the multiverse, because he's taking the multiverse and smashing different realities into each other, destroying them in the process until there's theoretically only one. And you're trying to where he would rule, but you're trying to stop them, and that's right. Like the final expansion,
right? And it's crazy complex.
Yes.
So I think my son and I played a lot of this, and he really enjoyed like the base level Sentinels. There are expansions that allow you to have two teams fight off against one another, which is on the road to Oblivion. And then Oblivion, it's got multiple decks. Like, it's got all kinds of stuff that's going on. And I can see that, like, you almost need to play it with like 4 or 5 people just so that everyone can pay attention to what the heck is going on, because there's so much. There's a fantastic game for iOS, Android, and Steam, which is the digital version of Sentinels. And I have to say, I play Sentinels every week. I just play it on the app because it manages all of the complexity. And when I play it, the last time my son and I played it, we actually played it on the app, because it manages all of the stuff. It keeps track of all the counters. Like, it just does all the math. It just makes it so much easier to play.
I love that part of it, but I miss the tactile feeling of all the cards and the drawing of the card yourself, things like that. I would love to see a VR version of that game.
Oh yeah.
Because it would be really fun to draw the card yourself, but have all the fiddly bits taken care of. Right. Like the Gloomhaven helper app is so helpful, because you don't have to get half the fiddly bits out of the box, because the helper app deals with all of that yourself. So yeah, I enjoy the video game version of Sentinels as well, but I really, really like the card game version, because it's like the tactile feel and talking with each other across the table instead of everybody looking at a screen.
Yes. No, I completely agree. But, for a solo game, it's fun.
Yeah.
If you want to play it solo, I would recommend playing it with the app rather than trying to break out like the version that I have here.
Gotcha.
And then lastly, we have an oldie but goodie.
Yes, I'm reaching way back into the past. I know it's been re-released since my copy that I have. We talked about this a long time ago, and I said I was going to mail it to you, but I'm still trying to find all the minis for it. So I'll find most of the minis, and you may have to use some proxies in the middle of it. But it does play to your love of things like Mothership and Aliens, which is Space Hulk, which comes from the Warhammer 40K universe. I wonder if Henry Cavill has actually played Space Hulk. I got this game, early 90s, late. It would either been like 88, 89, or very early 90s. Because I played it in college. Yeah, I played it in college. Basically, you are Terminator Space Marines. You are the elite of the elite in super powerful armor with bolters or a chain gun or chain swords, all sorts of a flamer, etc. The base game is standard loadout Terminator with a bolter and then a flamer Marine. And the flamer only has 6 shots, but each shot of the flamer will envelop an entire room in flame. And you're fighting the Gene Stealers, which is effectively aliens.
Yes.
Like xenomorph aliens. I think they would have gotten in trouble. I think they could have gotten in trouble, but they made these aliens have 4 arms and 2 legs instead of just 2 arms and 2 legs. So I think that they're legally distinct enough. But all the corridors are one, like you lay out a map, and they have different scenarios in the books. They have 10, 12 scenarios in the books, and there's a couple of expansions that add more scenarios and add more pieces. And of course, you can make up your own scenarios, but you lay out this derelict spaceship that the Terminators are going on to. All of the corridors are only 1 square wide, 4 or 5, 6 squares long sometimes. And then they'll open out into a room, and that room will have corridors branching off of it. The way it works is as you're entering in, you could be the Terminator player, or you could be the Gene Stealer player. As the Terminator player, you're starting to move on. As the Gene Stealer player, you have basically like a bag full of tokens, and you pull out 3 tokens every turn, and you look at them, but your opponent does not see, and then you place them face down onto the entry points that the Gene Stealers are known to be coming in from. And those are blips on the Terminator's motion trackers. And you get to move a certain number of spaces for each of these things. You can only you can't move all of them. I think you can only move 2 to 4. I don't remember exactly how many. You might even have to roll a die to see how many of the blips move. But you can choose which blip they are, and I think you can lift up the blip to remind yourself, oh, this one has this many under it. Okay. Right. So you're moving these things in to go assault the Terminators and prevent them from getting to whatever goal they had, because usually it's a goal-oriented mission. If they get to their goal, or if they accomplish their goal, game ends and the Terminators win. If you prevent them from doing it and eliminate all the Terminators, the Gene Stealers win. And so you have each of those blips has between 0 and 3 Gene Stealers under it. So you could use a blip that has 0 as a decoy to get the Terminators to all face one direction, while you bring up this other blip that has 3 and attack them from behind, where you definitely have an advantage. Because if as soon as a blip could be seen by a Terminator, you have to flip it over, show how many Gene Stealers are there, and put those physical models on the board.
Right.
But and then you can voluntarily flip it, so that if you want to rush in and attack, you could voluntarily flip it, put the Gene Stealers on the board, and go. If the Terminators have a distinct advantage against the Gene Stealers at range, because they have guns, Gene Stealers don't. But as soon as the Gene Stealers get into hand-to-hand combat with the Terminators, it is a slightly better than 50% chance that the Terminator will die. It is possible to survive, but the likelihood that the Terminator is going to die is very, very high. The Terminators are always outnumbered by the Gene Stealers.
Right.
And one of the reasons why I was saying I wanted to find all of the models for it is, like, you may have like 20 Gene Stealer models. If you have that many on the board, doesn't matter what the number is under the blip. If that blip is forced to reveal, it's actually 0 because you don't have any models to put more on the board. So sometimes you want to rush your Gene Stealers so that you have enough models to put more Gene Stealers on the board somewhere else.
Right. Right. Yeah. I wonder, I haven't looked to see about 3D printing something that is not a Gene Stealer, but perhaps thematically similar to a Gene Stealer that could be used in a Gene Stealer like way.
I'm sure it could be. I'm sure they could be. there are lots of different types of things out there that could be used as proxies. The rule books say, oh, the box has this many Gene Stealers and this many Terminators and blah, blah, blah. Right. So, you could figure that part out easily.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. I had hours and hours of fun, switching sides, playing Gene Stealer, playing Terminators, playing the expansions. There's some expansions where you're like, there's like an automated, basically robot crawler that's moving through the maze, and you roll a die to figure out where it's going, and you have to catch up to it, grab it, and take it back to the front. But if your guy dies, it drops, and I believe it starts moving randomly again. So but it's got data in it that is essential, supposedly essential. It's a game.
Yes,
it's essential to get back, and that's how you win. So you keep having to run back for it.
Yeah,
and I can't say enough about it because it was a game that played fairly fast. It did take a long time, but that's mainly because you're thinking about your moves and you're thinking about like the different tactics that you can do. The Flamer Marine only has 6 shots. So as the Terminator, you're like, do I flame that room and kill however many things are in it or possibly in it? Or did the Gene Stealer put a blip in there that instead of there's 2 blips in that room, but one could be a 0 and one could be a 1. And that's a big waste of a Flamer Marine's flame. But if it's 2 3s, that is totally worthwhile.
Right. Yeah. I think when we played it, and so honestly, I've never owned it. So I've only ever played it with other people, with other people's games. And so I don't know what the actual rules are, but most of the time when I would play it at a con, to be able to have multiple people play, you would divide up each person would get a Terminator, and then there'd be multiple people who are running the Gene Stealers. And so it would be like maybe 3-on-3. And then, and it was always fun. Like it was always desperate. And even when you were losing, you were laughing because it was so like you would lose so terribly. Right.
Oh, yeah.
Or it was so desperate, like the desperate run, like the game does an awesome job of generating sort of the dread that comes from like the Gene Stealers are coming. Like it creates those like the false hope that you think you can do it, and then like you're going to get to the end, and then all of a sudden the Gene Stealers swarm, and like there's one guy who's going to make it to the exit, right? And like you're the noisiest table at the con because everybody is cheering and everybody is booing, and now you've collected like every con I've been at that's had Space Hulk. You gain an audience, and now everybody at the con, like everybody, you've got 20 people at the table. 2 people are now still playing, or 3 people are still playing, or whatever. And there's like all of the like the back and forth of it, and it just creates this amazing energy.
Yes,
that I've always enjoyed.
And it was one of the first games that I had that had actual like Warhammer 40K, but actual plastic minis, that you'd want to paint, etc. I did a horrible job painting them. But at the same time, it was still a lot of fun. And it was one of those things that kind of also got me into more of the hobby side of stuff, because while it comes with really nice cardboard layouts of, cardboard pieces of the ship, of the corridors and the rooms, it's one of those things where, like I went and I found that Hearst Arts, they make silicone rubber molds for plaster. Gotcha. And they have like sci-fi, right? And it's made for gaming, so they're in squares, etc. And so you could theoretically make a much better looking, although it would play exactly the same, like style of like 3D Space Hulk that you're playing through this basically huge diorama, but you're still playing effectively on a board. Right. So it doesn't start getting into the impreciseness that some war games can sometimes feel, where you're measuring out with a tape measure. Right. You can count the squares. It's fine. Right. Like I love war games. They're great. I haven't played them in a while, but I love them. But this fits squarely on the board game side of things.
Yes. So I love it. Love to play it again. Who knows? Maybe if I actually make it out to Gen Con this year, let's take an evening and we'll play Space Wolf. But
that would be awesome.
Anyway, everybody, thanks for listening. If you have feedback, we love feedback. You can send it to us at podcast@Lair of Secrets or via Twitter @Lair of Secrets. And since Twitter, as we've mentioned previously, seems to be having some challenges this day and may, implode upon itself and collapse into a singularity like tomorrow. We're also on Mastodon, where you can find us on Dice Camp @Lair of Secrets. Links are in the show notes. We stream this live on Twitch, so if you want to get your fix of things early, unedited, and perhaps duplicated because we're having technical issues, you can join us on Twitch. We are Lair of Secrets, one word over there. You can also visit the mothership, which is lairofsecrets.com, and leave us some feedback, topic ideas, or your own thoughts about what we talked about today. We'd love to hear from folks about what your favorite board games are.